Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing the Grand Seiko Heritage Collection Quartz SBGP001. 40 millimeters in stainless steel. This is a lovely tribute to the long-running and classic 44GS model line using the equally legendary 9F caliber series that first bowed in 1993. So more about that history in a moment. Let's talk about the size. 40 millimeters in diameter, and because it's a quartz with a solid case back, it's thin at only 11.3 millimeters thick. Lug tip to lug tip, it is 46.7 if we just count the case. If we can count the end links of the bracelet, then it's 49.9 millimeters with a vintagey 19 millimeter spacing between the lugs. On my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, it fits well. I'd recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. It is quite thin. I believe it could wear on a smaller wrist if it were placed on a strap. Now, it's also quite thin, so it'll fit underneath the cuff in spite of the somewhat sheer bezel profile. We have a high-quality matching steel bracelet with an integrated end link to better mate the bracelet to the case. We have a combination of polish and satin. There's a rounded bevel on the side, and the outer faces are polished. This is a steel bracelet at Grand Seiko. They assemble those using screws, so you can see we have removable links fixed by screws. And then we have two intermediate-sized links, so if you're between sizes, you can remove or add those to fine-tune. Thick-gauge steel, single swing-arm deployant clasp, twin trigger release for security. We have the GS logo externally. So on this clasp body, we have satin, we have media blasting inside, and then we have polish. The case is the famed 44GS, which first arrived in 1967. It's a combination of creases, curves, and faceted lugs. The 9F movement, in this case we have caliber 9F85, that arrived in 1993. These are both classics in their own right, and they come together here with what Grand Seiko calls Zaratsu finish. This is their famous spinning tin plate polish. It's very involved. It takes about 3 years to master, and the surface to be mirror polished is held against a spinning tin plate. And this is done entirely by craft art knowledge and eye-hand coordination. So this is truly a handmade case. It's also quite attractive. And in spite of the fact that the watch does feature a push-down crown, it's also 100 meters water-resistant. You can see the Grand Seiko logo on the reverse side. It's more of a vintage Grand Seiko logo, and a vintage Grand Seiko logo on the crown as well. The bezel is remarkably complex. You can see that the lugs actually ride up the side of the bezel, and they actually fall away at the mid-case. So there's quite a bit of nuance to this case. The bezel is actually outwardly flared, and then sharply conical, arcing inward. We have the famed champagne sunburst dial, and I need to note that aside from certain porcelain or specialty dials like the Fugaku Tourbillon, this is stepwise the most work-intensive Grand Seiko dial. It requires more steps than the Kirizuris, more steps than the Peacocks, even more steps than the Snowflake. And creating the sunburst with the champagne, allegedly no fewer than a dozen steps are involved, and that's before we even get to the hands, the aperture for the date, the logo, and the indices. All of these are created by micrometric milling tools that are diamond-tipped and wrought by hand. So all of this is done manually by people who only cut and polish these parts all day long. You can see how the Dauphine-style hands are mirrored across their top. They're equally mirrored and razor-faceted on their side, and that goes for every single one of these indices. Jointly with Rolex, Grand Seiko has the best luxury class dials in the business. Hand-finished dial, hand-finished case. You're getting a lot of hand craftsmanship. The movement inside is caliber 9F85, so it's part of that family that's been around now for 30 years and really sets the pace for most quartz movements worldwide. I have this time zone feature that allows me to jump the hour independently, even drive the date forward or backwards depending on which direction I'm traveling. Doesn't affect the seconds hand, doesn't displace the minute hand. Now if I do want to stop everything and synchronize to a reference time, I just pull the crown out. I have a hacking seconds function. The crown is quite sturdy when fully withdrawn. This is where a lot of Swiss watches have crowns that wobble. This one is anchored still. Now of course the setting action is also very precise. There's very little dead angle. As I turn the crown, the hands jump almost immediately. Now the watch has caliber 9F85. What does all that mean? Well, it's a manufacturer movement that is watchmaker built, watchmaker tuned, and when the time comes, it is watchmaker serviced not just for the life of the watch, the life of the owner. This is luxury quartz. We're not talking about a gift and a Happy Meal or a Cracker Jack box. This movement is designed to go the distance. Many of the original 9Fs from 1993 are still going the distance. And quartz has its privileges. 3 years of battery life. We have the time zone jumping feature. We have the stop seconds feature. We have a double pulse system that allows the hands to be long and arcing, unusual on quartz movements, and yet not draw down the battery with undue speed. We also have a system that is known as lash adjustment that allows the hand to always align perfectly with the indices. Very precise. There's also thermocompensation, which means extreme cold and extreme heat won't cause this quartz movement to change its timing as a non-thermocompensated quartz would. There's also a quartz trimmer built in, designed to account for the drift of a quartz crystal over decades. Using the trimmer, the Grand Seiko watchmaker can adjust this movement to keep the same time it did the day it left Japan. And it's important to note that the accuracy is outstanding. This 9-jewel movement features a tremendous amount of traditional watchmaking, which is to say jewels and wheels and pivots, but it's accurate to plus or minus 10 seconds a year. Remember, a Swiss chronometer is typically accurate to plus 6, minus 4 per 24 hours, and a standard quartz watch is accurate to plus or minus 15 seconds a month. This is 10 seconds a year. And though you can't see it, the 9F caliber is actually pretty good looking. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.